Country music is built on heartbreak, but some of its greatest voices were silenced far too soon. Tonight, we're visiting the graves of country legends who died young, where they rest, and how they got there. Some lie beneath grand monuments. Some rest in quiet country churchyards no one visits anymore. All of them left the world with songs unfinished. Let's begin. We begin in Montgomery, Alabama, at the Oakwood Cemetery Annex, where the father of modern country music rests beneath a monument shaped by grief. Hank Williams was born in rural Alabama in 1923, learned guitar from a black street singer named Rufus Payne, and by his mid-20s had written a catalog of songs so honest and so raw that they became the foundation of the entire genre. Your Cheatin' Heart, I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry, Cold, Cold Heart, and Hey Good Lookin' poured out of a man in constant physical and emotional pain. Chronic back trouble, a collapsing marriage, and a deepening reliance on alcohol and morphine destroyed him even as his star rose. On New Year's Day of 1953, being driven overnight to a show in Ohio, Hank Williams died in the backseat of his Cadillac, his heart giving out at just 29 years old. His funeral drew a crowd larger than any Montgomery had ever seen. His grave is topped with a carved cowboy hat and inscribed with his song titles. And pilgrims still come, but most of country music has moved on and forgotten how it all began with him. We travel now to Winchester, Virginia, to Shenandoah Memorial Park, where one of the greatest voices country music ever produced rests beneath a simple bronze plaque. Patsy Cline was born Virginia Hensley in 1932, dropped out of school to support her family, and spent years singing in clubs before her extraordinary voice, capable of a heartbreak-drenched sob no one could imitate, finally broke through. Walkin' After Midnight, Crazy, I Fall to Pieces, and She's Got You made her one of the first women to cross fully from country into pop stardom, and one of the first to headline her own shows and demand to be paid like a star. She was tough, funny, and fiercely generous, mentoring younger singers and lifting up other women in a male-dominated industry. On the 5th of March, 1963, flying home from a benefit concert in Kansas City, the small plane carrying Patsy Cline went down in a forest near Camden, Tennessee, in bad weather. She was just 30 years old. Her grave draws visitors from around the world, but the marker bears her married name, and many who love that voice pass it without ever knowing the legend lies beneath. We travel now to Nashville, Tennessee, to Woodlawn Memorial Park, where several stars from that same 1963 crash lie, beginning with a beloved singer of pure country tenderness. Cowboy Copas was a star of the Grand Ole Opry whose smooth voice and warm delivery made him one of the most popular country performers of the 1940s and 1950s. He was born in Oklahoma in 1913 and built his reputation on gentle ballads and honky-tonk favorites, becoming a fixture of the Opry stage and a familiar voice on country radio for 2 decades. His career had cooled somewhat by the late 1950s, but he had staged a remarkable comeback in the early 1960s with the hit Alabama, returning him to the top of the charts and to the height of his fame. That comeback made his death all the more tragic. Cowboy Copas was aboard the same doomed flight as Patsy Cline on the 5th of March 1963, killed instantly when the plane crashed near Camden, Tennessee. He was 49 years old, at the peak of a hard-won second act. He is buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Gardens near Nashville. His grave is quiet now, his name largely forgotten, remembered mainly as a name tied to the crash that took Patsy Cline. We remain near Nashville for the pilot and manager who died in that same crash, a man whose ambition and misjudgment sealed the fate of everyone aboard. Randy Hughes was Patsy Cline's manager and the pilot of the small aircraft that went down near Camden, Tennessee in March 1963. He was born in 1928 and was the son-in-law of Cowboy Copas, deeply embedded in the Nashville country music world, both as a businessman and as a private pilot who often flew his clients between shows. On that fatal night, eager to get his stars home after the Kansas City benefit, Hughes pressed on into deteriorating weather, despite warnings. Flying a single-engine plane he was not fully equipped to handle in such conditions. Disoriented in the darkness and the storm, he lost control, and the plane plunged into the forest, killing him along with Patsy Cline, Cowboy Copas, and Hawkshaw Hawkins. Randy Hughes was just 34 years old. He is buried near Nashville. His grave receives almost no visitors, and history has cast him as the man whose fatal decision cost country music some of its brightest stars on a single terrible night. We travel now near Nashville for the fourth victim of that 1963 tragedy, a rising honky-tonk star whose life ended just as everything was falling into place. Hawkshaw Hawkins was a tall, handsome country singer known for his deep voice and his flashy stage presence, a Grand Ole Opry star who seemed poised for major success. He was born in West Virginia in 1921 and became popular in the years after the Second World War with a string of honky-tonk hits, cutting a striking figure in his rhinestone suits. He had recently married the country singer Jean Shepard, and his career was surging thanks to his new hit Lonesome 7 to 7,203, which would climb the charts after his death. On the 5th of March 1963, Hawkshaw Hawkins boarded that ill-fated flight home from the Kansas City benefit, and he died with the others when the plane crashed near Camden, Tennessee. He was 41 years old, leaving behind his pregnant wife and a career on the very cusp of stardom. He is buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Gardens near Nashville. His grave is seldom visited, his promise unfulfilled. One more voice lost in the crash that country music has never forgotten but rarely properly mourns. We travel now to Carthage, Texas, where a velvet-voiced legend rests in a memorial park built to honor him alone, though few make the journey. Jim Reeves was one of the smoothest and most beloved voices in country music history, a founding figure of the polished Nashville sound that brought country to a global audience. He was born in Texas in 1923 and briefly pursued professional baseball before a shoulder injury turned him toward music. His warm, intimate baritone made hits of Four Walls and He'll Have to Go, and his gentle style won him fans far beyond the usual country audience, especially in Europe and Africa. He seemed to have decades of stardom ahead of him. On the 31st of July 1964, Jim Reeves was piloting his own small plane through a violent thunderstorm near Nashville when he became disoriented and crashed into dense woods. He and his manager, who was flying with him, both died, though their bodies were not found for 2 days. He was just 40 years old. He is buried at the Jim Reeves Memorial Park east of Carthage, Texas, marked by a statue of the singer. A modest stream of older fans still visit, but the velvet voice is fading from memory. We travel now to Nashville, to Spring Hill Cemetery, where a honky-tonk talent of extraordinary promise lies, cut down at the very moment of his breakthrough. Keith Whitley was a singer of such pure, aching, traditional country talent that many believed he would become one of the greatest of all time, before alcohol destroyed him young. He was born in Kentucky in 1954 and came up through bluegrass, singing with Ralph Stanley as a teenager, before pursuing a solo country career built on his warm, expressive voice. After years of struggle, his star finally rose in the late 1980s, with #1 hits like Don't Close Your Eyes and When You Say Nothing at All, and he was hailed as the future of country music. But Whitley had battled alcoholism for years, a disease that repeatedly nearly killed him and that he could never quite escape. On the 9th of May, 1989, at the height of his newfound success, Keith Whitley died at his Nashville home of acute alcohol poisoning. He was just 33 years old. He is buried at Spring Hill Cemetery in Nashville. His grave draws devoted traditional country fans, but his talent and his loss deserve to be remembered far more widely than they are. We travel now to Tennessee, where a trailblazing woman of country music rests after a senseless accident on the way to the stage that defined her. Dottie West was one of the most successful and beloved women in country music history, a Grammy-winning pioneer who opened doors for the women who followed her. She was born in poverty in Tennessee in 1932 and overcame a brutal and abusive childhood to become a major star, with hits like Here Comes My Baby and a celebrated series of duets with Kenny Rogers. She was a warm, generous presence who mentored younger artists for decades, and she remained a fixture of the Grand Ole Opry stage. In August 1991, running late for a performance at the Opry, the car in which she was riding crashed near the Opry House entrance. Dottie West suffered severe internal injuries in the wreck and died 5 days later at 58 years old. She is buried in her home county of Tennessee. Her grave is quiet now, her trailblazing career for women in country overshadowed by flashier and more recent names, a warm and pioneering voice slowly fading from country's collective memory. We travel now to West Virginia, where a honky-tonk singer of deep traditional feeling rests after a life shadowed by sorrow. Mel Street was admired for his rich, classic country voice at a time when the genre was turning slicker and more polished, a singer's singer beloved by traditionalists. He was born in West Virginia in 1933 and worked as a house painter and a radio host for years before his warm, mournful voice finally brought him a string of honky-tonk hits in the 1970s, including Borrowed Angel and Lovin' on Backstreets. He seemed to embody the pure, unvarnished country sound that many feared was being lost. But Mel Street battled alcoholism and deep depression throughout his career, private demons that his sorrowful songs seemed to foreshadow. On the 21st of October, 1978, on the morning of his own 45th birthday, Mel Street died by suicide at his home. At his own prior request, his hero George Jones sang at his funeral, an honor that moved the country community deeply. He is buried in Tennessee. His grave is little visited, and his sorrowful story and his beautiful traditional voice are nearly forgotten today. We travel now to Alabama, where one half of the most influential harmony duo in country history rests after a violent death on the highway. Ira Louvin, with his brother Charley, created some of the most beautiful and haunting close harmony singing in the history of country and gospel music. He was born in Alabama in 1924, and as the Louvin brothers, he and Charley recorded classics like When I Stop Dreaming that would shape the sound of the Everly Brothers, Emmylou Harris, Graham Parsons, and countless others. Ira was the high tenor, and also the volatile, troubled brother, whose temper and heavy drinking eventually strained the act until the two split and Ira went solo. His mandolin playing and soaring voice were unmistakable. In June 1965, not long after the brothers parted, Ira Louvin was killed in a head-on collision in Missouri, struck by a drunk driver on the highway. He was 41 years old, and in a grim irony, he had himself long struggled with alcohol. He is buried in Alabama. His grave is quiet, and though the Louvin brothers' harmonies echo through all of modern country, few visitors ever seek out the resting place of the tortured tenor who helped create that sound. We travel now to Shreveport, Louisiana, where a crossover star known as the Singing Fisherman rests after a highway tragedy at the very peak of his fame. Johnny Horton was a country singer who found enormous mainstream success with vivid historical saga songs that topped both the country and pop charts. He was born in 1925 and, after years of steady work, broke through spectacularly at the end of the 1950s with The Battle of New Orleans, North to Alaska, and Sink, the Bismarck, becoming one of the biggest stars in all of American music. He was an avid outdoorsman, which earned him his nickname, and he seemed to have a long and brilliant career ahead of him. On the 5th of November, 1960, driving home from a performance at a club in Texas, Johnny Horton was killed instantly when a truck driven by a drunk driver struck his car head-on. He was just 35 years old. In an eerie twist of fate, his widow, Billie Jean, had earlier been married to Hank Williams, making her the widow of two country legends who both died tragically young. He is buried in Shreveport, Louisiana. His grave is quiet now, his chart-topping sagas rarely heard. We travel now to Nashville, where one of the most influential stylists in the entire history of country music rests, his voice worn down by hard living. Lefty Frizzell shaped the phrasing and the sound of country singing more than almost anyone, directly influencing George Jones, Merle Haggard, Willie Nelson, and generations beyond. He was born in Texas in 1928, the son of an oil driller, and burst onto the scene with a remarkable run of early 1950s hits, including If You've Got the Money, I've Got the Time, and Always Late. His relaxed, sliding, deeply expressive vocal style became the template that countless singers would follow. But alcohol, mismanagement, and the pressures of the business steadily eroded his career and his health over the following 2 decades, and the hits grew further apart. On the 19th of July, 1975, Lefty Frizzell died of a stroke, his body worn down by years of hard drinking. At just 47 years old, he is buried in Nashville. His grave is quiet, visited mostly by fellow musicians and devoted students of the music, but his influence is present every single time a country singer bends a note. We travel now to Louisiana, where a beloved honky-tonk star, known as the Hillbilly Heartthrob, rests, a generous man undone by his private sorrows. Farron Young was a fixture of country music for 4 decades, a charismatic honky-tonk singer and a genuine friend to the industry he loved. He was born in Louisiana in 1932 and became a star in the 1950s with hits like Hello Walls, written for him by a young Willie Nelson, and later, It's 4 in the Morning. He was known for his humor, his generosity, and his business sense, even co-founding a major country music trade newspaper that supported the industry for years. But behind the cheerful public image, Faron Young struggled with depression, declining health, and a fading career that weighed heavily on him in his later years. On the 9th of December, 1996, Faron Young died by suicide at the age of 64, a shock to the country music world that had loved him for so long. In accordance with his wishes, he was cremated and his ashes were scattered, leaving no grave at all to visit. The hillbilly heartthrob, so beloved in life, left the world with no marker, only his songs and the memory of his warmth. We travel now to Nashville, where the beloved singer of gunfighter ballads rests after a lifetime of heart trouble finally caught up with him. Marty Robbins was one of the most versatile and popular entertainers country music ever produced, a singer, songwriter, and even a race car driver adored by millions. He was born in Arizona in 1925 and grew up listening to tales of the Old West from his grandfather, stories that would later fill his music. He scored huge hits across genres, from the teen ballad A White Sport Coat to his signature masterpiece El Paso, a cinematic gunfighter ballad that won a Grammy and remains one of the most beloved country songs ever recorded. He was a warm, energetic performer who seemed larger than life. But Marty Robbins suffered from serious heart disease for much of his later life, enduring multiple heart attacks and pioneering bypass surgery. On the 8th of December 1982, Marty Robbins died of complications following heart surgery at 57 years old. He is buried in Nashville. His gunfighter ballads are still treasured by those who love them, and his grave is quietly visited by the faithful few who remember. We travel now to Texas, where one of the finest songwriters America ever produced rests after a wandering life consumed by his art and his demons. Townes Van Zandt wrote songs so beautiful and so devastating that the greatest names in country lined up to record them, though fame always eluded the man himself. He was born in Texas in 1944, into a prominent, wealthy family, but he abandoned every comfort and expectation for a restless, self-destructive life devoted entirely to writing and performing. His songs, including Poncho and Lefty and To Live Is to Fly, are considered among the finest ever written in any American genre, covered by Willie Nelson, Merle Haggard, Emmylou Harris, and many more. But Townes was consumed by alcoholism, drug addiction, and a deep, lifelong depression that he poured directly into his work. On the 1st of January, 1997, Townes Van Zandt died of heart failure brought on by decades of hard living. He was 52 years old, and in a haunting coincidence, he died on the very same date as his hero Hank Williams. He is buried in Texas, and his grave has become a quiet pilgrimage site for the songwriters who revere him. We travel now to Nashville, where a singer who bridged rockabilly and country rests, his energetic career cut short by sudden illness. Bob Luman blended the fire of early rock and roll with the heart of traditional country, a dynamic performer admired throughout the industry. He was born in Texas in 1937, the son of a musician, and was drawn first to the rockabilly explosion of the 1950s, before finding his lasting home in country music. He scored the enduring hit, Let's Think About Living, in 1960, and built a loyal following over the next 2 decades, becoming a popular member of the Grand Ole Opry, admired for his stage energy and his gift for interpreting a song. He seemed to have many good years still ahead of him, a steady and beloved presence on the country scene, but his health failed him early and without warning. In December 1978, Bob Luman died of pneumonia in Nashville, at just 41 years old. His lively blend of rockabilly and country silenced far too soon. He is buried at Woodlawn Memorial Park in Nashville. His grave is seldom visited, and his energetic, genre-crossing music is nearly forgotten today. We travel now to Tennessee, where a beloved Grand Ole Opry banjo player and comedian rests after one of the most shocking crimes in country music history. Stringbean, born David Akeman in 1916, was a gentle, old-fashioned entertainer beloved for his comedic banjo playing and his warm, folksy Opry performances. He was born in Kentucky and became a fixture of the Grand Ole Opry and later the television show Hee Haw, where his shabby costume and sweet humor made him a national favorite. Deeply distrustful of banks after living through the Great Depression, Stringbean was known, or rumored, to keep large amounts of cash hidden on himself and at his rural Tennessee home. That reputation proved fatal. In November 1973, returning home from an Opry performance with his wife Estelle, the couple surprised 2 burglars who had been ransacking their cabin looking for the hidden money. Both Stringbean and his wife were shot and killed. He was 57 years old. He is buried in Tennessee. His grave is quiet, and his kind, gentle spirit is mourned by those old enough to remember the beloved entertainer whose trusting nature led to such a senseless and brutal end. We travel now to Colorado, and then to the mountains themselves, for a beloved singer of country-flavored anthems who has no grave at all. John Denver was one of the most popular recording artists in the world in the 1970s, and though often classed as folk or pop, his warmest hits are woven deep into country music's fabric. He was born Henry John Deutschendorf in 1943, and rose to enormous fame with songs like Take Me Home Country Roads, Thank God I'm a Country Boy, and Rocky Mountain High, celebrating rural life, the land, and the mountains he loved above all else. His clean, earnest voice and his devotion to the natural world made him beloved across the globe. He was also a passionate and experienced pilot. On the 12th of October, 1997, John Denver was flying a newly acquired experimental aircraft alone over Monterey Bay in California when the plane suddenly went down into the Pacific Ocean, killing him instantly. He was 53 years old. He was cremated, and his ashes were scattered over the Rocky Mountains of Colorado that he had immortalized in song, leaving no grave to visit, only the peaks and the country roads he made the whole world love. We travel now, for our final resting place, to Tennessee, where one of the best-selling country artists in history rests after a sudden and shocking death on the road. Conway Twitty scored more #1 hits than almost any artist in the history of country music. A smooth and powerful singer, beloved for his romantic ballads and his devoted fans. He was born Harold Jenkins in Mississippi in 1933 and began in rock and roll before finding his true home in country music, where he became a superstar with classics like Hello Darlin' and It's Only Make Believe. His long series of tender duets with Loretta Lynn are among the most beloved in the genre, and his fan club and his loyal following were legendary. He seemed unstoppable, still recording and touring at the height of his powers. On the 5th of June, 1993, after a performance in Branson, Missouri, Conway Twitty collapsed on his tour bus from a ruptured abdominal aortic aneurysm and died hours later, at 59 years old. He is buried in Tennessee. His enormous catalog of #1 hits is still beloved by the faithful, and his grave is quietly visited by the fans who have never forgotten his voice. Country legends, resting across the American South and beyond, some beneath grand monuments, some in quiet churchyards, some with no grave at all, their ashes scattered over the mountains and rivers they sang about. What connects them is the cruelty of the arithmetic and the strange, recurring shape of country tragedy. So many lost in the sky. Patsy Cline, Cowboy Copas, Hawkshaw Hawkins, and Randy Hughes in one terrible crash near Camden. Jim Reeves in his own plane in a storm. John Denver in the Pacific. So many lost on the highway. Johnny Horton, Ira Louvin, and Dottie West, killed by drunk drivers or racing to the stage. And so many lost to the very demons the music itself so often describes. Hank Williams and Keith Whitley and Lefty Frizzell and Townes Van Zandt. Worn down by alcohol and sorrow, Mel Street and Farron Young, lost to despair. They gave country music its voice, its heartbreak, its honesty, and most of them paid for it with their lives, dying young, dying suddenly, dying too soon. What we can do, tonight and every night, is remember them. Play their records, say their names, think of the specific ground where each of them lies, or the mountains and waters that hold them now. It costs us nothing, and it is the one thing we can still offer the singers who gave us so much and left us so early. They gave us their voices and their sorrows and their whole brief, brilliant lives. The least we can do is not forget where they came to rest. Thank you for walking with me. Rest well. And if you pass a cemetery in the coming week, and you have a moment, stop and read a name. Any name. Someone was loved, once, who is buried there. It costs us nothing, and it may be the only thing that keeps any of us from disappearing entirely. Good night, friends.